Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Today we're going to start a series on essentially the assault, going into close combat. A lot of our games incorporate some rules to get into hand-to-hand combat, and a lot of our armies have units that are tailored to that type of combat, whereas other units may be more a shooting style. You may wonder why assaults are so important, from a tactical perspective, and I think that if you look at what we're about to cover, you can see how assault is actually something you might want to pay closer attention to in your tactical repertoire. Okay, we're going to be basically exploring a few field manuals that I covered. The primary one we're going to look at, though, is called Offense and Defense. It's Volume 1. It's Field Manual 3-90.1, Volume 1. And in it, it's all about executing the attack. Now, one of the things that we found in these manuals is they talk about attacks assaulting positions and actually going after occupying the position the enemy is holding. So that's what we're going to be looking at. How do we use the concepts that they put out training for our own soldiers? How can we take advantage of that and apply that to the tabletop? So let's take a quick look. So I'm going to start with one definition to kind of set the stage for what we're really dealing with here. Now I'm going to be reading out of various portions of the actual field manual. We're going to start with, right out of the glossary, we're going to look at the definition of the tactical mission task called Seize. Seize, this is Appendix B, the paragraph 39. Seize is a tactical mission task that involves taking possession of a designated area by using overwhelming force. Now, the second sentence after that takes it one step further. That's usually beyond the scope for games, but I think it might be important to realize what we're really trying to accomplish in these Seize objectives. An enemy force can no longer place direct fire on an objective that has been seized. Okay, so let's kind of just talk that through. So here what we're dealing with is looking at an objective. Now, not necessarily an objective marker that's on the table, but an objective within your game that you have decided, which could be an enemy position where a unit is holding a terrain piece that is advantageous. That could be an objective that you want to seize. It's not an objective that's going to get you points by the rules of the scenario, but it is going to give you some advantage in the game. So we're going to use the term objective in this series of videos to talk about the area that you are trying to occupy. And again, it may or may not be represented by an actual objective marker. So the idea is we're going to hold it, and then we're going to prevent the opponent or enemy from directing any fire onto that spot. That's the part that usually cannot be done during the game, because the game is usually ended before then. But think about this. Once you've taken that position, you want to hold it for whatever reason. So that means you have to limit the ability for the opponent to engage that position. So we're going to use the tactical mission task called Seize as the crux of this whole discussion. Okay. Now, before we go into how do you do it, let's cover some things that I think are extremely important. So important, in fact, that these are brought up in the manual themselves. We're going to go right to the section, essentially Chapter 3. Executing an attack is the section we're talking about. And we're going to go to section sentence or paragraph 62. So it's 3.62. Here, you might, if you've read or listened to my Sun Tzu videos, you might actually hear some of these recurring themes. But this is very, very important. The commander must avoid becoming so committed to the initial plan that opportunities are neglected. The commander is mentally prepared to abandon failed attacks and to exploit any unanticipated successes or enemy errors by designating another unit to conduct the decisive operation in response to the changing situation. Then further down in the next section, next paragraph 63, the commander avoids dogged adherence to a plan no longer appropriate to the current battlefield situation or condition. The difference between success and failure in combat often depends on the commander's ability to make a plan fit existing conditions than trying to make circumstances fit the plan. Okay, so I want to keep that in mind. We're thinking here in terms of going to close combat to hold seize a position, to take out an enemy position, right? We have to make sure that that is not the thing that's buried in our mind, so that all we try to do is make that thing happen. We have to remember there's a lot of ways to get the enemy off the position. If you're intent on using it by a close assault, that's fine, but be prepared if the circumstances change and make that assault more dangerous, less tactically wise. Be ready to abandon it. So, having laid that as a groundwork, let's talk about, well, how do we go about assaulting the position? Okay. Before we go into the next sections of paragraphs, let's talk about assaulting force first. The manuals talk about they talk about the assaulting force, supporting force, breaching force, those kind of things. Little segments of your army that are tasked to do certain things. Well, you need to actually have elements in your army that you recognize as good for assault. Now, these could be units that have special rules that allow them to be good at assault, or they could just be a portion of your army that's just like most of the others, except maybe they don't have special weapons that the other squads may have, just so that they can leverage the assault aspect of their work without sacrificing too much in the case of firepower, right? So you just have to determine within your army which of the units do you have are going to be best used for assault. Then you need to also determine which units can be used for assault and when, okay? Because remember, you have to adapt your plan to the circumstances that you're facing. All right, so think in terms of, before we talk, you have a unit that is full strength, ready to go, is designed for close combat. You're good to go there. But there's some other options you can have. Smaller units, maybe the ones that have been whittled down. They may not have the firepower equivalents they used to earlier in the game, but they may be now better suited to assaulting an enemy position. For example, assaulting a heavy weapon position or artillery position. The smaller unit is large enough to overwhelm, with close combat, the crew of the machine gun or the heavy weapon or the artillery piece. So they could do it. They didn't start the game as something you're thinking about using for close combat, but during the circumstances of the battle, the attrition on the unit and their current size, the current position, makes them probably a pretty good candidate to assault a position that you need to take, or a weapon system you need to nullify. Okay, so always keep in mind what are the units that are going to be your assaulting army. Now, before you can assault, this is the part that I find fascinating. I figured this was going to be a quick one-segment video, right? Turns out no, because there's a lot that goes into actually preparing that assault. You don't simply just move them up and go in, which is usually what we do on the tabletop. According to all the field manuals, what they're telling us, trying to teach us, is you need to prepare for this actual attack. Prepare it by doing a couple different things. And we're going to talk about those preparations in this video, and we'll actually talk about engaging in the next video. So, the first thing you have to do is disrupt your enemy. And in, again, still section 3 or chapter 3, paragraph 69, it's disrupting one or more parts of the enemy's combined arms team weakens the entire enemy force and allows the friendly commander to attack selected portions of the remaining enemy force in an asymmetrical manner. Now that is important because in order to free yourself up to make that assault, you need to protect the assaulting unit by disrupting the enemy. Take out weapon systems that could threaten it on its approach as it goes in there. Take out the weapon systems that could take out your supporting units. You need, again, this is all about threat selection, prioritization, and you want to pick the right ones to attack. Disrupt them, take out key units that the opponent may be relying on heavily for his defense or attack. If he has one or only, let's say he only has 2 anti-armor weapons on the board, take out one of them. Take out both of them, and all of a sudden your armored equivalent are going to be much safer, and they'll put more pressure on your opponent. If your opponent has some heavy weapons that are really good at taking out infantry, like mortars and machine guns, and you take those out, all of a sudden their ability to whittle down your infantry is hampered, and it makes your assault more likely. So again, disrupt the enemy with the firepower you have available to you. Finally, the next piece that we're going to talk about is actually fixing the enemy. Now, fixing the enemy is called, essentially, is when you hold them on that objective. You prevent them from their freedom of movement. And you can use any of the air denial subject or methods we've talked about before, but one way you can do this also is through suppressive fire. Constantly put pressure on that unit so that they can't afford to move. They can't afford to leave the spot that they're currently in. You might want to prevent their escape. You might want to ensure that you can get in there and make that final charge. So let's talk a few things about the fixing the enemy. In 3-75, it's the primary purpose of fixing the enemy is to isolate the objective of the force conducting the decisive operation to prevent the enemy from maneuvering to reinforce the unit targeted for destruction. So you've got that unit you want to destroy, you want to take out. You are going to isolate it by interfering with the units nearby that could reinforce it, and keeping it from escaping, going out to get near those. Remember, reinforcement is all about proximity to the friendly units. So you're trying to isolate this unit. Fixing the enemy must be done with the minimum amount of force. The commander normally allocates the bulk of his friendly combat power to the force conducting decisive operation. So fixing operations by necessity are by necessity shaping operations that illustrate economy of force as a principle of war. Economy of force is another set of videos I've done. I'll put a link somewhere up here and down in the comments below, or descriptions below. Therefore, the commander carefully consider which enemy elements to fix and target only those that can significantly affect the operation's outcome. So, you're choosing to fix those units that can interfere with your success. That's the approach here. One method of isolating the objective is to conduct shaping operations using lethal and non-lethal effects. Lethal effects may range from sniper fire to a joint fire plan designed to totally destroy a selected portion of the enemy force. Non-lethal effects such as electronic warfare can prevent the enemy from receiving orders or vital intelligence or combat information. Now, non-lethal force, how does that fit into a war game? Actually, some weapon systems great, and some games actually have units that have special abilities that actually interfere with the opponent's unit movement. Some units have the ability to make it more difficult for an enemy's models to come in from reserve, or come in where they want, when they want. Right there, that is a non-lethal effect, right? You're impacting the enemy's ability to support and to do the things he needs to do with these non-lethal methods. So what we're trying to do here with what we just read is we're trying to prepare ourselves for the assault. We need to isolate that one unit that you're trying to remove. It's usually one unit that's in the way. Maybe there might be a couple, but you're trying to isolate it, which means you're trying to, with both the parts of your force, you're trying to put suppressive fire on that unit to make it less effective. And then you're also trying to put the effects, lethal effects especially, on other units around it so that they cannot support it. They can't lend their support. If you've got units on either side, if they are close enough, for example, a commander with a bubble of leadership, you need to deal with him so that he can remove that leadership bubble. You can remove the leadership bubble from that unit that you're trying to assault, right? That's one example of trying to get rid of or fix the enemy, isolate it by removing these other supporting units. A lot of preparation has to go into those different things before you can actually think about doing an assault. So I want you to kind of, before next week or next episode, think about how you can identify, in the games you're about to play, look at areas where you might want, there's a particular piece of terrain that the opponent has occupied, or there's a particular unit that you need to neutralize and with a by occupying that space, because maybe it's on an objective, for example. Look at that unit, or the couple units that are in that area, and think about how you would have to neutralize the ability for the units immediately around it to support them, and neutralize the ability, the effectiveness of the units you're targeting with an assault, or will be targeting with an assault. Neutralize their combat effectiveness. That is how you set the stage so that you can do the next step. And so next time we'll actually talk about attacking on the position. So we'll see how this all plays out. So I hope that, I know this is a little bit more, this may seem a little more esoteric, there'll be a little more effort on your part to kind of interpret this and see how this would play out. I'll try to develop this more fully in the next video as I talk to the specifics about actions on the position that you're trying to assault. Okay? Alright, so hope that was helpful. If you want, share this with your friends. Of course, that would give them some advantages too, but share this, like the videos, and subscribe if you will, and we'll see you in the next edition of the Academy. Bye-bye.